Hey, everybody. Welcome to Pianist Academy. I am Charles Szczepanek. Good to see many of you here today. Hello, Becky and Becky. I think we have two Beckys in the house. Welcome to both of you. Bedlington Groomer, welcome. David. Hello, David, Nancy, Rob, OCD King, Bethany. Good to see many friends. And if it's your first time here, welcome. We're going to have a great time. Oh, noteworthy is Bunny Hollow too? Okay. Well, we have one Becky. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Just a very quick note about what you just heard as we all came in and got started. I have a new EP coming out this Friday. That track that was just playing in the intro is on it. If you're interested in it, there's a link to pre-save down below in the description. So if you do that, you can pre-save it on whatever platform you listen to music on, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, whatever it is. And it would help me out if you do. It's completely free. And then it'll be saved to your library when you open it up on Friday when the release is out. Thanks, Bedlington Groomer. Okay, that's all for the news today. Let's talk about piano. Hello, Sir Wolseley. Welcome. So feel free to, like last time, actually, we don't have any masterclass submissions. So this is an open session. And feel free to jump in, ask any questions that you would like to. Bachwards Fellow, hello. Yes, don't forget the thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. Yeah. Okay, so is Antonio here? I haven't seen Antonio. Antonio usually chimes in the chat and says hello right away. And Antonio sent me the first question that we're going to kick off with. Apologies if there's a little bit of delay in streaming. Hopefully there's not too much for everybody. I just got a little spinning circle on my end, so hopefully everything's okay for you. So, Sir Wolseley, question on pedaling and a Chopin mazurka. Great. Antonio is also here. Okay, awesome. Sir Wolseley, we're going to get to your question second, but I promise it'll be second. Okay. And Bethany, then we'll talk about that VST project. Yeah. Hello, Dith. And Sir Wolseley, even in preparation for your question, because I thought you might be here, I pulled out my Schirmer edition of the Chopin mazurkas. The spine isn't even cracked yet, because I have never performed any, believe it or not. But we're going to talk about that mazurka. Hello, Catherine. Okay, so Antonio had emailed a question. Antonio always has these great questions, and I get why he emails them, because they're kind of lengthy. It would be difficult to type in the chat on the live, but we're going to start with his question, because I also think it's a great question for everybody that is tuning in. So let's see. He says that I've pointed out in various occasions, analyzing his videos and other people's videos, how important it is to keep the left hand, usually the left hand, keep the harmonization out of the way by playing it at a lower volume or lower dynamic. He says, using a VST, he's found it easy to help by editing samples above middle C to a different volume than those below middle C, so like 50% lower, so that it sounds suitably subdued no matter how you play. Hello, Rhodesy. So Antonio's question is, to what extent is it ethical or advisable to alter our instruments in order to obtain an ideal result? This is a balance between hands. And what's the line between legitimate improvement and cheating? Would helping ourselves by modifying the instrument's response hinder our progress in the long run? Or is sound manipulation actually a useful skill? Great question, Antonio. And by the way, hello to everybody else that has joined in. And David, I'm sure the gasp is combination of my addition being Schirmer and not something nicer. And that I've never actually performed any of the mazurkas. I'm sure that's what you were gasping about. Hello, Rhodesy. Hello, Nathaniel. Hello, Calais. And Rhodesy, sounds like you just completed your first ballade. Very nice. Congratulations. Yes, David. I guess, David, I jumped into the Chopin Nocturnes and ballades and etudes, and I skipped over the mazurkas and actually the waltzes. I've only performed waltzes, Chopin waltzes arranged for other instruments, actually. Interesting. Yeah, Rozi, please send it in. Okay, so Antonio, and for everybody, we're talking about balancing dynamic between the hands. We'll start with that facet of the question. Hello, Alexis. We'll start with that facet of the question. And, gosh, this is going to be quite an answer, Antonio. It's really important that we learn as pianists how to balance the dynamics of different textures and of different layers that we're presented with in the music. Whether that is between the left hand and the right hand, whether that is notes that are shared between the hand, whether it's the other way around, whether the left hand has the melody like that, right? We want to learn how to do all of that. And it's best if we could start doing that as soon as possible in the process. Now, I know that hands, first of all, playing hands together for a lot of people, especially at the beginner level, is a challenge. There's a coordination challenge with playing hands together, just no matter what it is. Then on top of that, there's an additional coordination challenge with getting the hands to do very different things at different times. I think the first thing that we face when we're studying is simply using different fingers at different times. And probably most people approach this or experience this when they start to play scales in parallel hands together. Because even though we're playing the same pitches, we're using different parts of the body in both hands. We're using different fingers, and we're using different combinations of fingers simultaneously. That's why sometimes beginner students, and sometimes I've done this too, we will start with hands together scales in contrary motion because they actually use the same fingers simultaneously between the hands. Kale says, I don't remember how I learned to put hands together as a kid. That's a second component, because if we all think about how we learned to coordinate various activities, that we do on a daily basis, or that we have done in the past. Like, walking takes coordination. Riding a bike takes coordination. Tying our shoes takes coordination. And think about when we learned all of those things, probably very young in life, right? And the brain, especially earlier in earlier stages of development, the brain makes those types of physical connections very, very fast. And it doesn't do it as fast as we get older. That's just how we're wired. We're wired to do different things better when we're older, different things better when we're younger. Okay, so physical coordination is one of those things that gets a little more challenging with time. Okay. Let me answer, Antonio, about the use of VST, of any digital software where you alter like a split, and we alter the volume of one side of the keyboard to be different than the other side of the keyboard. Let's answer that first. I think there could be some value in that. And that is because I think it would be really good for our ears to understand what it actually is, or at least closer to what it actually is that we want to be playing, even after we have change the split or don't alter the volume between sides of the instrument, right? But we do want to have the ear say, oh, I recognize what this is supposed to sound like, and I recognize it while we're playing. That's good. And I think that would be a case to say, yes, use a piece of digital software to do that. I'll answer at the end of this question about acoustic instruments. I mean, we all know it's much more difficult with an acoustic instrument to make an alteration like that. But I think that is where the benefit stops, is that we're training the ears to hear something that we want to be able to replicate all the time, but we need the hands to be able to do it. So giving ourselves an aural understanding is great, because then it's going to be even more. We're going to ask, let's say, even more of our hands when we go back and practice truly executing it correctly with just the playing mechanism and not with some help later on. But at least we have somewhat of an idea of how it works. Now, I wouldn't spend too long doing ear training with 50% less volume on one side of the keyboard than the other, because every time we play with the left hand 50% artificially lowered, we're also imprinting something that's not great, right? And we're creating neural connections that say, when I play with this much force that we feel, it's going to sound a certain way. That's not good. So we want to balance the amount of time we spend, because we want the ears to recognize what does sound good about it, but we don't want to spend so much time playing repetitions that the body thinks it's just going to happen that way all the time, right? Because not only, right now, Antonio, on pieces you're working on, you want to create this balance between the two hands. But at some point, that's going to change. Like the little demonstration I played at the beginning, sometimes we're going to want to bring the left hand out. Sometimes we're going to need to play an arpeggio in the left hand that has a bigger crescendo, and you're not going to be able to create a split point where you can control that artificially, right? Other times, even in one hand, like in the right hand, a great deal of the time, if we're playing anything, we want to usually voice the melody note. Right, so all of that stuff, because that's all moving around, we can't pre-program any of that. Okay. Oh, so let me go back to your question. Okay, I think I answered a couple of these. So to what extent is it advisable to alter the instrument? We talked about that. What's the line between legitimate improvement and cheating? You just can't rely on it. You can't rely on it. So if I just in general terms maybe spend 5 or 10% of your time listening to the shift in tonality and the shift in not tonality but tone color, and the shift in dynamic that you've programmed in, but then go back, try to recreate that. If you go back and then try hands separately to recreate that, can we do that without any alteration in the behind the scenes? Okay, so I covered the would modifying the instrument's response help us or hinder us? I think we've talked through that as well. Let's spend maybe a minute talking about a quick way that we could all get a little bit better with this. Even though playing the piano is a hands together and coordinated activity between the hands, I still think it could be beneficial, especially when when we need to do things that are so different between them. It can be really beneficial to practice them separately. At some point, yes, we will have to bring the hands together and we will have to coordinate how they work together. But in the meantime, we can do a lot of good building of neural pathways hands separately. So especially if the left hand is difficult to control, focus on it, practice playing it the actual dynamic that you want without the right hand involved. And every repetition that we do, you are going to become more and more comfortable with executing that. And we want to get to the point where, let's say we're practicing a specific piece. We want to get to the point where maybe, at least at an earlier level, the dynamic and the color that we play with become an automatic part of how we play. And if we can isolate it and work on it separately, we're actually going to attain that with one hand at a time. And two, we're going to be building the right kinds of connections in the mind to make it possible to do it in the future. Same thing with the right hand. Now, of course, adding the hands back together always poses a new coordination problem or an issue, right? And it's usually the dominant hand wants to lead the weaker hand or the non-dominant hand for most people. hopefully, at this point in the process of learning, we have spent long enough. Yes, Agent Smith automatic removes playing in the moment, but we're talking about a really beginner level. And I have yet to meet a beginner student who is capable of coming close to creating a shape off the top of their head. I mean, maybe if they're only been playing a year, but they're extraordinarily gifted, yes. But Agent Smith, you were right to bring that up, because for us later on, we do want to play more in the moment and have a greater idea of how we're shaping things and be able to control it and respond to it as we play. Yeah. So Antonio, you said, yeah, you've noticed the parts of piece that you've extensively practiced hands separated are much more comfortable. That's good. So we want to get to the point where some of that, or especially on an individual piece basis at an early level, that this becomes automated to the point where we don't have to think so hard, and to the point where the one hand joining in the process isn't going to interrupt, remove, cloud what the other hand is doing, right? That things are really distinctly separated. The more practice we do like that, the more easily we're going to be able to combine that earlier in the process without doing it hands separately. And then the more control we're going to realize that we have as we play, where we could play something in the left hand very quietly. Right? And have control over at least more. Bedlington Grimmer, you said when you say shaping, you mean dynamics or rubato, both. Both saying something musical. So rubato, dynamics, even if we don't think about breath as being a part of rubato, yes, all of the above. Yes, and what Bachward's fellow is said is exactly right. The only problem with modifying the instrument is that then it's not just not very helpful, it's impossible to go to a different instrument when you're dependent on the machine. Now, I wanted to come back and talk about, hello, Jeff. I wanted to come back and talk about the acoustic instruments, those of you that have some. And I saw a quick comment earlier in the chat. And Nathaniel said, I swear that on my teacher's grand, the notes below middle C are relatively quieter compared to your piano at home. That is totally possible, and there are ways that we can change the voicing and the regulation of acoustic instruments to alter how they feel to play. Now, making a significant alteration to an acoustic instrument, like a 50% reduction in volume or something like that, is never going to be a good thing. The instrument might not even respond. You might not even be able to get it to do something like that. But if you do notice that, there are some notes that pop out, or there's a register of pitch that pops out or that doesn't pop out, there is an opportunity to talk with your piano technician about evening that out. There for sure is. Or you could make subtle changes, but I would never advise to do anything real massive with how you adjust the internal components, unless you really, really know you have a specific preference and you're at a level where you can discern the difference between your preference and an inability to execute on the instrument, if that makes sense. So, yeah. And what Bachward's fellow said, yeah, pianists are forever having to effectively adapt your technique in order to play authentically on different instruments. That's true. Yeah, Agent Smith, I'm actually a Mason and Hamlin artist. So I don't have one at home, but I would actually argue that Steinways are probably the worst at holding on to their tuning and regulation. And Mason and Hamlins are among the best. I would put Yamahas among the best also. But Steinways, and I even have some students that have Steinways, and every change in the season, their piano goes completely out of whack. And they have to have some major work done. And I've played on Mason and Hamlins that have gone like a decade without having to have major regulation done, even in drastic changes of temperature. I think they're really, really good at that. Okay. Antonio, I think that's going to wrap up that answer to that question. Yes. Yeah, Agent Smith, yeah. A lot has to do with also how it's been set up. And yeah, if you keep the temperature precisely the same and the humidity precisely the same, there should be little to no movement at all. Most people don't do that. Unless you're a really, really serious player. But that's great. Okay. I gotta jump back in the chat. We've had a lively discussion, and I am grateful for that. But I wanted to jump over to Sir Wolseley's question on pedaling and Chopin. Okay. Let me pull up the score, Sir Wolseley. And apologies that I don't think I'm going to be able to show this on the screen like I usually do. Okay. Sir Wolseley, you say pedaling regarding the first section. Okay, and in the Ekier version, there are pedal marks for the whole bar, every bar, full pedal, but does not sound good. Okay, even the Schirmer has those. Some of the pedal marks that we get in Chopin are actually Chopin's pedal. And this would, especially if it's in an Ekier version, I would think that it's truly they were Chopin's pedal marks. So Wolseley, you know this already. Did Chopin's piano sustain as long as the modern instrument does? Well, Sir Wolseley answers that. Agent Smith, yeah, I think that's different, very different from piano to piano with Mason. And yes, Agent Smith, Chopin had a modern piano, but it still was very different than the full modern design, let's say, that truly Steinway developed around 1850. It sounds a lot different if you hear a period instrument. Bachward's Fellow, was I able to smooth out? Well, we've done a little bit of work on it, but no. And my technicians basically said there's probably we've done about as much as we can. Yeah. Okay. So, Sir Wolseley. All right. Well, forgive me for sight reading this. Yeah. So, Sir Wolseley, I would not pedal the way it's marked in the score, because just to demonstrate for everybody what you're hearing at home, that has how the pedal is marked. One pedal for the whole bar. That's not great. Even if we really, sometimes, I've actually been talking with a couple of students the last 2 weeks about this, so I'm bringing it up. Even if we really appropriately bring out or exaggerate the top, there's still not enough. Still way too blurry. A lot to do with that chromatic movement. Those two. So, Sir Wolseley, great that you have an acoustic instrument at home, because if you could find the point where we start to half pedal this, can we half pedal the second half of the bar? So I'm not completely releasing the pedal. I'll go back to bar 1 so that I'm playing the same stuff so I won't miss any notes here. There's just a little release. And I think you can hear that the pedal is doing a little bit of work. Yeah. So, Sir Woolsey, we're looking for a point where we can half pedal or flutter pedal right around that point where the dampers come in contact with the strings. So in an ideal situation, we're going to be able to hold on to a little bit of this low stuff. That's going to be a lot easier done on a really great concert grand than on a small one or on an upright like I know you have. But ideally, that's the sound we're going for, is just a little bit of extra resonance in the low area. That's too much. While we try to clear up the chromatic movement in the upper part of the right hand. But we're not pedaling every quarter note, not pedaling every beat, because that will sound far too choppy. Yeah. Also, Sir Woolsey, to aid in this, because of physics and physical reasons and acoustics, strings that have more mass, right, resonate. They continue to ring, they continue to vibrate a lot longer. Even though the dampers in pianos are made to be larger for those strings, they continue to ring a lot longer. That both makes it possible for low notes like this to be repedaled, where I can catch them over and over again. It also makes it possible for them to get too blurry. So we want to balance between both of those things. Second, be sure where slurs are written, and you don't always hear me say this, but this is one of those occasions where slurs are written, truly play that with a legato or legatissimo articulation. So really letting the fingers crawl up the keys and stay in the key for a long time, because we want all of this pedal work to only be affecting what's going on with the dance-like movement in the left. Yes. And not be obscuring or clouding or causing breaks, because, so like I said, the lower register rings a lot, right? And it will continue to ring even as we half pedal to some degree. The upper register, from, say, just generically speaking, from middle C on up until we get no more dampers, will cut off far more quickly. So if we're pedaling and half pedaling really well, we might hear the right hand get choppy if you're not playing with a very legato touch. So yeah, Sir Woolsey, did you pick this piece or did your teacher pick this piece? Because knowing what we've discussed before, if they picked it, I know exactly why. You picked it. Okay, well, good. Sir Woolsey, do you have any other questions before we move over? Because I know you've been waiting 2 weeks for an answer to this or for my thoughts on this. So if you have another question, chime in. And if you don't, we'll move on to the next one. I'm just reading some of the chat. Sir Woolsey, you said you're going to ask about fingered legato, but you answered. Good. I'm sure that the Ekier edition has some great finger choices in there. Most of the time, I like his a lot, and I follow his. I've mentioned on other streams, but I'll mention it again because I know we've got some new people. I always compare Ekier's editions of Chopin with Paderewski's, and I almost always gravitate toward the fingerings by Ekier over Paderewski. Paderewski's never feel they never feel very comfortable. And I'm always looking for something different. And then when I look in the Ekier edition, it's like it's a gift given. And Sir Woolsey, you said you are changing them. Okay. Okay. Well, good. Let me jump back in the chat and see what else we've got coming in. But thanks, Sir Woolsey, for the question, and thanks for coming back to answer it, even though I didn't get to it last week. And Sir Woolsey, we will be looking forward to hearing your performance of this, because I know Sir Woolsey has sent in recordings many times to these streams. So, yes. David, you ask, is Ekier the same as the Polish National Edition? Ekier is usually the editor of the Polish National Edition, but he's also been the editor on the other prominent publisher is the Wiener Urtext. That's Wiener. Wiener Urtext editions of Chopin are usually edited by Ekier, and there can be sometimes some small differences in the edition between the Wiener Urtext and the Polish National. Pretty sure I got that right. Pretty sure I got that right. Okay. Agent Smith, playing Chopin pieces in all 12 keys. That is great. The Godowski Chopin Etudes. I don't personally know anyone, including people that have multiple degrees in piano. I don't know anyone who's learned any of the Godowski Chopin Etudes. Out of, I don't know, 300 or 400 pianists, I think those are pretty rare. Pretty rare to learn. Wonderful pieces. Extraordinarily challenging. Yeah. And Agent Smith, I brought up what you said about playing Chopin in all 12 keys because, this is a great segue, I have a video coming out this Friday that isn't quite that advanced, but it's on the same topic. So, very nice, Agent Smith. Okay, let me jump back to the beginning. And Bethany, you had a question after Sir Woolsey, and it popped in right at the beginning of the stream, so 30 minutes ago. Bethany, you said, what's the VST you've been working on recently? It's the VI Labs Modern D that I did a lot of work for them, beta testing it and doing promotional materials, making some recordings for them. And I will be doing more recordings on it soon. See, Becky, noteworthy, said your teacher sent you an improv that you're supposed to write out with no software. And you got the melody and the bass and the harmony, but you can't decide how to count it out or draw up measures, etc. Okay. Great job, first of all, Becky. Great job figuring out all of that stuff. You're already well on your way. Your next thing that you need to do is try to hear where is the, can you find the beat? Can we find the pulse? So that's the first thing. Can we find the pulse? And then as we're counting, where do we hear the natural accents of the pulse? If I had the recording, I could help guide you through this process. But without being able to hear it, we're listening for, some simple questions to start with. Does it sound like it's in, like it's a waltz? Is it in 3/4 time? Does it have a movement where that's bass followed by 2 chords? If it doesn't, less likely that it's in 3/4 time. So we're trying to use some process of elimination. Where it gets more complicated is if it's in 4/4 or 2/4 or 2/2. Those timing signatures are all going to be related, but it has. I saw Agent Smith's comments, and they're making me think about other things. And I'm sorry, Becky. The Liszt Sonata, because I have played that piece. Okay, Becky, it says it has a longer first note and then seems like 3-note patterns. That could be in 4 or it could be in 6. Like if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So listen for where do we feel that push off that leads us into the phrase. And if there is, I wish it was easier to describe than this, but we can go through a few time signatures and how they feel quickly here, just for everybody's sake. And this also links to something that we talked about at the very, very end of the last stream, which is about differences in how time signatures feel. Okay, if we're in 4, just to give you some basic demonstrations, if we're in 4, there's going to be a bigger pulse on 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1 is the main pulse, 2 is secondary, 3 is a second main pulse, 4 is the least important. Yeah? Okay, that's in 4. In 2, let's say 2-4, we just have a main pulse followed by a secondary pulse. So unlike 4-4, 2-4 is strong, weak, strong, weak. 4-4 is strong, weak, medium, weak. Okay? So we're listening for, when you're listening to your improv, we're trying to figure out, does it fit one of those two, Becky? 3-4, strong, weak, weak, strong, weak, weak. Right? Okay, 2-2. What is 2-2 time? 2-2 is 2 beats per measure, but half note gets the beat. So it would be notated similar to quarter notes, but instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we count 1, 2, 1, 2. So we're supposed to be feeling larger phrases, right? Like in 2-4, it's a strong beat followed by a somewhat weaker beat in 2-2. Okay, the compound meters, like 6-8. 6-8, 6 beats, but truly 2 main beats per bar. So 1, 2, 1, 2. The subdivisions are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, where 1 and 4 align with beats 1 and 2, the main beats 1 and 2. 9-8 would be similar. It's probably, you probably don't have something in 9-8 from your teacher. So I would guess, Becky, because this is a listening example, it's probably going to be in one of those time signatures we just talked about. It's unlikely that it's going to be in a something else. Yeah. Becky, I hope that answers your question. I hope it does. It's a great thing your teacher's working on with you. So great to be doing that ear training. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Agent Smith, I'm not a fan of Hannon at all, but playing Hannon in every key, yes, I would agree with that. Or being able to play it in every key. Yep, absolutely. I agree with that, Agent Smith. I feel like I'm talking to the FBI here. Backwards fellow, I think you give yourself more credit. You're better than a middle intermediate player. Yeah. Okay, I'm jumping back to the beginning to catch up on the next question that came in. Let's see, here we are. Dith said you picked up a second teacher purely for sight reading, and it's been an interesting experience. Great. I'm glad you're doing more sight reading. So, okay, Z Spark. Here's your question. You say you're working on the Kulau Opus 55 number 1. For you, it's faster, and the scale runs are really... Okay, it's faster probably than other things you've done, and the scale runs are really the first time you've experienced hand fatigue. Yes, Z Spark, you should send a video. Okay. Let's go back down to the bottom. I don't have any of the Kulau stuff on my iPad, and I do not have any paper scores of that. But if we just talk about some scale technique, you should never, ever, ever experience hand fatigue playing scales if we're doing them correctly. They can be extremely easy to play extremely fast. That shouldn't be a problem, right? Not saying that it'll be easy to get them that fast, but that there should be no hand fatigue and there should be no strain to play them quickly. Agent Smith, you're bringing up a lot of stuff that's they're interesting discussion points, because I also don't agree with practicing with a metronome. Because I think, for me personally, metronomes introduce mechanical playing. So Woolsey, if you need forte and very fast, so going back to scale technique, if you need forte and very fast, take your time, practice slowly, practice with I would practice with great detached articulation on every pitch of the scale at a slower tempo. So we're working on really triggering the fingers well. So a lot of activity in the fingers from the bridge down with minimal lifting. Okay? Great. That's a medium speed for practicing detached. Yeah? Okay. Agent Smith, I would agree with that. I still teach that a different way, though, the metronome stuff. But I do teach, yes, Agent Smith, yes, activating from the knuckle, from the bridge. That's right. I do teach when I teach pop playing with a click track, the way you're talking about. But usually not classical. I don't teach classical pianists, that kind of stuff. Okay. Hand fatigue. My favorite way to teach and to practice any sort of scales that we're having trouble with them becoming tiring is to get rid of the legato. Yes, Agent Smith, I don't agree with that either. I don't like the pyramid shape like this. I don't like that. I play down here because I teach the hand should be in the position that it naturally falls when we release. If we're up like this, that is tension, and that's can cause other issues. Yes, even if the wrist is lower, you can tell that it's a very foreign place for me to play from. I don't like the bridge up there. It introduces a whole lot of tension in the bottom of the hand that I don't like. Yeah. Okay, scales. Detached. And I also teach my students to play this with letting the arms be free. So we're actually articulating from the arms down, from the, let's say, especially from the elbow down. Okay. Getting rid of the legato is going to help to get rid of any sort of holding on that we do, which causes the hand to tense up and collapse a little bit. We'll need to reintroduce that later, if it's even appropriate to reintroduce. Because, like we've talked about before on streams, let me just double check. This was from Z-Spark. Yeah. A lot of times, scales in repertoire should not be completely legato because the tone won't be correct. So if we eliminate that, and then we can reintroduce as much as we want later on, or as little as we need later on, to maintain the correct motion with the hand. Because as I've demonstrated before, scales at a very, very fast speed, the legato is a natural byproduct of the speed, and it is not something that we create with how we play the instrument. So Z-Spark, I haven't heard you chime in on this. But working on the scale runs in this Kulau sonatina, I'm assuming, take them slower, take them detached, play them forte, but without any tension in the hand, the wrist, or the arm. Yeah, Okay. Okay, no worries, Z-Spark. Yes. So take it slowly, work on them one note at a time with really, really good technique, right? So what we just talked about. The second part that is built into, but I'll point out for the sake of pointing this out, that's built into playing detached, not focusing on staccato, which is quicker releases, not legato, which is smooth connected releases, but detached playing focuses on a very relaxed release of each key. So, sometimes, if we do this in an extremely relaxed way, we feel the key itself push the finger back up. We release just enough that the key does the rest of the release for us. Then we're truly playing detached with a really healthy technique. Okay? Because if we introduce lifting to create detachment, now the hand and the body is fighting itself. I realize, Z-Spark, that I'm saying all this in just a few minutes, but it is a process to practice. So give yourself grace and take some time and work on it one passage at a time. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's jump back to the next question. Oh, great to hear, Kale. I finally got to your comment. Great. I'm glad that you reached out to that teacher. Wonderful. Awesome. Rotzi, I have not had time to listen to Ben Laud's Chopin podcast. I'll have to catch up on it. I haven't heard any of the episodes, actually. So I know I have a lot to catch up on. Okay. Let's see, Kale, this was a question that you had earlier when we were talking about hand-separate practice. You asked, do you work on the right hand first in a piece? That really depends on the level that we're playing and who we're talking to. Personally, I only work something hand separately if it's an extremely technical, challenging spot. Even in those cases, I usually don't, unless there's really something in particular that I'm focused on. But I wouldn't teach. It really depends on the level. Really depends, and it depends on what's going on. There could be different reasons to learn the left hand first or the right hand first. So for example, if a student needs to work more on phrase and more on understanding shape in a melody, we might work on the right hand first. If we need to work on balancing between the two hands, we might work on left hand first. That's a good question, but it's a really difficult thing to answer in a generic way. Oh, thanks, Sir Wolseley. Sir Wolseley said, nice cup. It says Pianist Academy on it. Christian, I see your comment right here at the bottom. You say you took lessons a few months ago. You had to stop because of hand, wrist, and forearm pain. You started PT, which is great. Yes, Christian. Please send a video over and we can talk about it on the next stream. Absolutely. Dith, I'm going to have to come back to your question that I just see at the end because I'm trying to get through from the beginning. Let's see here. Somebody must have asked about what people were working on. Because now there's some discussion of repertoire back 20 minutes ago. Bethany, you say you brought up the coordination improved a good bit practicing Bach conventions. Those are really, really wonderful for learning to shape melodies in both hands and develop both hands equally well. Some of the best stuff, when we get to the point where we can attain those and start to learn those are really, really great things. So is the rest of Bach. right? Diff. So I'm seeing your comment from before. You said the basic idea, we were talking about sight reading, is to learn to better recognize chords and chord progressions. 100%. After that, you get close enough to what's written on the page that a listener would recognize the song. Okay, that's a good first step. Yes. And then after that, we're going to get to the point where we do actually play all the notes that are on the page. And we play them right. First sight read, right? But what you're talking about, better recognizing chords, chord progressions, patterns. It's all about pattern recognition. That's sight reading. And it will serve you until you play repertoire that isn't written in the standard tonal idiom, in which case a lot of that goes out the window and becomes very different. But I'd say for a vast majority of music, pattern recognition is going to be extremely important. Okay. Yes. And Becky, I see you're working on a few of my arrangements. Wonderful. Thanks. I'm trying to get through all of the chat that was going on earlier and see what the next question is. Okay. I think I've caught up. Looks like I've caught up to quite a bit. There's a lot. If I missed a question, I see Seth's question is here. That's the next one I'm going to answer. And if I've missed your question, please just type it in the chat again, and I will get to it. Seth, you said, do you have any advice for getting better at telling how different 16th note combinations feel? You get lost if you're not counting the subdivisions, so you can't really play faster than you count. Seth, I'm assuming you're talking about dotted rhythms with 16th notes, yes? So, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be a dotted eighth, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and so on. That would be one combination. Another would be 1E and a 2, or 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a, where the 16th is on the first. Rajat, hello. Seth, I would drill that kind of like on flashcards. If you could make your own flashcards, or there might be even an app for this. Or you can just play them at the piano and say, okay, I'm going to play dotted eighth 16th, and I'm going to play a bunch of repetitions of that. So I was just using we could use a scale, you could use an arpeggio. These are like practicing in rhythms. Gosh, you could do that if you need to practice your scales. Practice in rhythms. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4. That would be 1, yeah? So and then if we have 16th, 8th, 16th. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2. And so on. To the point where we can start to see that shape on the page. So going back to pattern recognition, yeah? We can see that shape on the page, and we can recognize we don't have to count it out as often. Or we may have to count out the first one to remind us, oh, that's what this rhythm feels like, that's what this rhythm sounds like. But then we can slide into all of this practice that we've done that says, oh, it's this. Yeah. That would be my recommendation, Seth. Drill them flashcards or just scales in various rhythmic patterns, pulling the patterns from these different 16th note combinations. And it would be even great practice, write them out that way. So if you have paper or your iPad, write out 1 octave in whatever rhythm that we're going to work on for the next 5 minutes. Write it out. And then play it. Count the first one, and then we're going to try to stop counting, try to get out of our head, or don't count all 4 subdivisions. Can we feel it in one? Can we feel it in one beat? One way to try to get out of that, I was just telling an in-person student of mine this on Monday this week. Let's say we have a passage, or in this case a scale, either one, and we're having trouble stopping counting because, let's say, as soon as we stop counting and it's at a slow tempo, we either get the rhythm wrong, right, or we just cannot speed up because we cannot count all of the subdivisions fast enough to continue to speed up the tempo. Take your phone or whatever recording device you have and record yourself slowly playing the passage or playing the pattern in question. And at least the Voice Memos app on iPhone has this great option where you can change the playback speed. So you can record two examples. For example, let's say we're working on dotted eighth 16th, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, right? Count that out loud into your voice recorder while you play it. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, so on, as many octaves as you'd like. Play another example, counting it only in your head, but still at that slow tempo. Yes? Now, when you finished recording those, take your app and speed up the playback. On iPhone, you can get 125%, 150%, 175%, and 200, so twice as fast. And in both cases, you're going to have yourself counting it out loud, right, in the first case, and you're going to have it at a variety of tempi that maybe would have been too difficult for you to execute yourself at the keyboard. But you're going to be able to hear it back, your own voice and your own playing, played accurately because we recorded it at a tempo we can achieve, right? And in the second case, we're going to get a full representation of the rhythm that we're working on at a faster tempo where we can count along with the recording. There aren't the placeholders already there for us. We can count along with the recording and say 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And we can count the main beats instead. And now we're starting to feel the 16th note subdivisions or this rhythmic pattern. We're starting to understand just what it feels like and what it sounds like without having to count 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a, right? That is a mouthful and it's very distracting. If it's already difficult to count, it's more than distracting enough to get in the way of what we're trying to achieve at the piano. So, Seth, you'll have to let us know how that goes if you try that out. Okay. Let's see here. Sir Woolsey, I just want to touch on one more thing because you asked about hand fatigue lying in forte and very fast playing. I missed that comment. I mean, I saw and I responded to how to practice to play forte and fast. But in playing forte and quickly, most often it actually doesn't need to be quite as strong as you think it does. It's when we bear down on the keys and overexert in an attempt to reach a higher dynamic. Yes, that is absolutely where hand fatigue and all kinds of tension problems set in. But if we even just psychologically think it doesn't have to be forte, it could be mezzo forte. And how much easier is it to play mezzo forte quickly than forte? It's great. It's much easier, right? And then when we want to play a passage, just that one psychological change can affect how it feels to execute. And it's still going to probably be plenty loud enough. Yeah. In the cases where it's not we can still achieve greater and greater control of that with lots of really practicing having active fingers, because at high speed, the arm has to be guiding the hand along, and the fingers have to do a lot of that work. So, and that's all the stuff I already talked about with detached practice. Let's see, you said it was referring to K311. I don't think I have that here either, Sir Wolseley. Is that another piece you're working on? Oh, maybe I do. Let's see. Scale run in the first movement of the sonata. That's the spot, right, Sir Wolseley? Okay. Well, I'll give it exact a more practical response about this excerpt since you're working on it, and it's on the subject. Rajat says, think of bouncing off the key bed fast. Yeah. But I would stress bounce in that, or like a bell. Raj says, like a bell is good as long as the activity off the key bed is natural, almost like an instinctive response, as long as it's not a lift. But truly, a bounce is a using stored kinetic energy to release, or it's just finishing. The kinetic energy that we put into the key is subsiding. Does that make sense? All right. Rhodesy, scales, and thumbtucks. Okay, so we're talking about basically starting there, and we'll stop here. Okay. So. Yeah. I think that's a fast enough tempo, right, Sir Wolseley? And Raj, if you know this piece, others too. Pretty sure that's plenty fast enough. Yeah, that's great. Even though it says forte, because of the period this is from, it does not need to be like a Rachmaninoff forte, which would be... Right? You could even hear, when I did that, how much the tempo slowed down, because it's just a totally different dynamic. Mozart forte is going to be very comfortable to play. So, right, if we think, okay, here we have forte and piano around the score. Yes, right, so. That's more than enough. Okay, so. Sir Wolseley, what Raj said is great. I would still do it also the same way that we talked about before, detached. And I like to feel I like to feel a throwing of the wrist in at a slower tempo, because through all of that, I want to program in a little bit of an automatic response in the wrist that is going to become minimized and more efficient at speed, but it's still going to exist. So it's not just all fingers trying to play this, because if it's all fingers, it's probably not going to be very strong. So I'm going to program in a little wrist flick on each note for each of those, right? Da, da, da. And let that be really detached, easy releases. Secondly, Sir Wolseley, practice in rhythms, rhythmic groupings. In addition to practicing the rhythms, I'm giving an accent from the wrist on the first note or the long note of each group. and shift that long note to be every single one of the 4/16ths. Up. That was number 2. Number 3. And number 4. Okay. All of that practice is going to, what we want to do is when we get to tempo and we say we're going to sit down and just play it and we're going to play it musically, that forte feels easy because of the other things that are already programmed in the playing. Right? I hope that makes sense. And Raj, yeah, great. A second comment there. The forte could also be expressed through a greater sweep of phrasing, inflecting the top of the scale strongly. Absolutely. And that would not just, I wouldn't say that that's just a good way of expressing forte. I would say that leads to a very musical representation of the phrase. And Sir Wolsey, fingers crossed, your teacher is not insisting on full finger legato through here. That will lead to some really tight playing. But something with a little less finger legato is going to have more of that crystal-like, bell-like sound and that clarity of articulation that we really want at tempo in a piece like this. Yeah. Cool stuff. Hey there, Amy. Hope you are well. Good to see you. Let's see. Christian, you asked how often do I stream? Every 2 weeks, about every 2 weeks. Usually the 2nd and the 4th Wednesday of the month, Christian. And that is when I do these streams. 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month at 10 a.m. Mountain Time in the U.S. 12 p.m. Eastern. I think it's 5 p.m. London. Yeah, okay. Let me go back and... So I know, Raj, you had a question. I see Dith has a question. Let's see. Okay, so I've got those two to get to. Let's see. Here's Raj's question. Then we're going to come back to Dith's because I think, Dith, yeah, you've been talking to a few people about repertoire suggestions. Thanks, OCD King. Oh, Raj, I missed this comment earlier about hand fatigue, and I'll just reiterate this because it's also very, really nicely articulated. Sounds great. Raj said about hand fatigue that it also comes from trying to push to get a louder sound. That's similar to what I had talked about. Our natural instinct is to conceive of louder sound with more mass, but in reality, it's more speed and impact. I'll add to that, it's more speed at impact. Yeah. Yeah. Great comment, Raj. Okay, here's your question. You said, what should one think about or focus on when performing? You feel disembodied and awkward when you perform and you can't get to the naturalness with which you usually play. And your technique gets disrupted. Great question. And I know, Raj, that you're talking from a highly advanced perspective. By the way, I mean, one of the last times we talked, I think you were playing, weren't you playing a Rachmaninoff concerto with orchestra? How did that go? I know that we worked on the Rachmaninoff Second Sonata a little bit on a stream last year, I think it was. So, yeah, let us know. Yeah. I hope it was a great performance. Yeah. So, yeah, anyway, let me start to answer your question, but I'd love to hear if you have any like memories or thoughts about how the performance went. Yeah. Okay. So what do we focus on? Or You said, yes, what should one think about when performing? Let's divide this into two categories. In the first, the more simple category, but equally difficult, is dealing with nerves and anxiety in performance or on stage in front of people, whether that's, one person, 5 people that are a jury, or a performance in public for, an auditorium full of people. In dealing with that, right, when we feel nervous and stressed and anxious, our mind likes to go to places that have very little to do with what we actually need to play at the piano. We can start thinking about a lot of other things. And your job in those situations, I would say two things to think about or focus on. Control your breathing so that it's not rapid. Control your breathing. That controls your heart rate. That controls a little bit of our stress response. We might not be able to completely get rid of it, nor do I think we'd want to. I think actually being a little anxious about our performance can be a good thing because it can heighten our senses and heighten our awareness if we know how to harness that extra adrenaline and that extra energy and channel it into what we're playing instead. So think about some breathing and focus on one of the things that I used to love doing when I felt really anxious about performing as a student. Obviously, I wear glasses, right? And if I was playing a performance and it was all memorized, if it wasn't a collaborative performance, I would always take my glasses off. And I wouldn't play with contacts. I would play without glasses and without contacts. I could see the keys just fine. But what I really liked was that it helped me to remove myself from the fact that there was like a big audience sitting to my right. I didn't want to be as aware that they were there. I wanted them to feel a little further away, right? So that's one thing I would do. We could do similar things if we just think about or imagine, or if you have a choice, like Raj, talking to you specifically, if you have a choice about how bright the house lights are for a performance that you're going to give. I love having them lowered to like nothing or almost nothing. Or I used to love that. I don't play that way anymore. Things are different these days. But when I felt nervous and I felt like I had trouble focusing on what I was doing, I would have the house lights turned off or as off as possible. And you might still be able to see some of the people because of how bright stage lights are and how the light bounces, right? But combination of those things, just trying to separate ourselves a little more from the audience. I say that with a smile because I also know that, when we perform, anytime we perform, we're trying to communicate with them too. So we want to be careful how far we go, with that. The second piece, so that was purely dealing with nerves. The second piece, though, is that in a piece of music, I would say we should be focused on the exact moment that we're playing, every single moment of the performance for the entirety of the performance. And to me, that's what actually makes being a concert artist maybe one of the more difficult things that I've done. It makes it very difficult for lots of people if you do it well, is because we have to be fully present for every single movement the hands make, every single note that we play. Now, the great thing is if we achieve that level of awareness, and that means we have to achieve it in practice, for sure, because it's definitely not going to happen in performance if we can't do it while we're just practicing. So don't let your practice go on autopilot. Don't let your practice, end up playing through 4 pages of a sonata or concerto and say, that went well, because we were kind of listening or kind of tuned into what was going on. No, be super present with every single pitch and every finger movement. Be really aware of what your hands look like when you play. Be really aware of what they look like in the fall board when you play, because you might glance at your hands while you're performing on stage. You might glance at the fall board. We want all of that to be very recognizable. Guess what? For every moment of every piece, for the duration of the concert. So we can sum that up. Just be simple, but be fully present at every moment. We're not thinking about what happened. We're not thinking about what's coming up. We're not thinking about the fact that we're even playing on stage in front of people. We're not thinking about that we're performing. We're just purely 100% engaged with the music that we are making in the moment. And perhaps reflecting on the previous 5 seconds of what we played, to keep it all connected. We know where we're going with it, of course. And I do think that can be a really difficult thing to apply at earlier levels, especially if you're taking exams or, if we're starting to give performances or playing in studio recitals, things like that. It can be, we don't always have enough practice dealing with the nerves of performance to even get to the level where we can say, the nerves are under control and I can really focus on the music I'm making. But the more performing you do, the more practice you have performing, the better this is all going to become, and the more natural it's going to become. Yeah, so Raj, you said it's like being very mindfully connected to our experience at the piano. Yeah. I think it was Rubinstein who used to say he would pick one person in the audience and play the concert for that person. Instead of the whole room full of people, he would play for that one person, which made it a more intimate connection. And I think that, if you don't mind looking out at the audience, I think that could be something else that we do. And it kind of actually goes back to the fact that, I may have mentioned this last week, but some of my least stressful performances have been for the most amount of people. If I've been playing with orchestra and it's in a big hall and there's 1,000 or 2,000 people present, it's like that everyone is far enough away. It almost doesn't even feel like I'm performing, in a sense. It feels far different than playing in like a 75-seat intimate recital hall. Far different, where you can like see the expression on every person's face, and you can see that so-and-so in row 3 fell asleep. Maybe like during the climax of a Chopin ballade, they're over there napping. You can see all of that in smaller venues, and you don't see any of that. You don't get any sense of that in the larger venues. And especially now, if you're working with conductor and you're working with symphony, and Raj, I know you are doing that too. There is so much communication happening between you and the conductor, especially that focus sometimes is enough to really help us zone in on what we're doing. So. Yeah. Some of the most stressed performances I ever gave were in studio recital in my professor's office, where my colleague is like sitting behind, like not even 3 feet behind me. I can feel them breathing on me. Extremely stressful. Yeah. Yeah. So Raj, you said concerti, much more relaxing to perform. I agree. Yeah. And actually, for me, all collaborative music has been far easier to perform than solo piano repertoire. So, yeah, and it has to do just the fact that there's communication happening. There are other things to focus on. There's just not time to get in our heads. And really, there isn't time in solo piano repertoire either, but it's easier to slide into that perspective, if that makes sense. That was a great question, Raj. Good memories for me, too. And nice, I see you're working on Beethoven 4 and Rock 3. Very, very wonderful. Yes. Awesome. David, I see you said many people seem to have channels you're unaware of. Would it be okay to post channel names so we could follow them? Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I would also, you know, it would be great for it to be kind of a reciprocal thing where if we post channels here for people to follow, I'd love, you know, if there was a way for people to say, hey, like I got referred to your channel from Pianist Academy, that would be cool too, so that there's links going to both places. That would be really awesome. Okay. I think it was it Dith that was talking about choosing repertoire? And Bethany, I cannot find your question unless it was the one right at the very, very beginning. Gosh. Kale, you can always go back and watch some of the replay. So Bethany, right at the beginning, or not right at the beginning, maybe 20 minutes in, I said the VST is the Modern D by VI Labs, if that's the answer that you were looking for. And if it is not the answer that you were looking for, can you type in your question again? Because I have no chance I'm going to be able to find it. Bethany, you know what? It was like a minute way earlier. Yeah, well, there you go. The name of the VST, Modern D by VI Labs. And Kale, yes, I saw that. Thanks. Dith, I wanted to get back to you because Dith, we were talking about repertoire, right? And I think you said RCM level 6. Is that what you're trying to decide? And if it is, which of the, were you looking just for recommendations for all of the repertoire or from a specific period? Yes, Bethany. Sounds good. List B, you said. So classical style repertoire. Dith, what have you chosen for your other pieces? Because sometimes that has an impact on what we pick, because we don't want things to be too similar, especially between the lists. If there's too much similarity, we might choose something else. So, what's your A? C. You settled on Bach D minor prelude for list A. Okay. And Chopin. Oh, the Chopin. I see why you said it's the Chopin for C, and you're doing Autumn Leaves for an etude. Okay. I see. I think you and Sir Wolsey were talking about the Dussek Sonatina. I do not know that composer. I do not know. So I do not know the piece, right? But oh, and there's a Wesley Sonatina. Okay. Yeah, the two that I lean toward would be the Beethoven Bagatelle on the list and one of the Haydn selections. Okay, yeah. So I see, Sir Wolsey. So the Beethoven Bagatelle or one of the Haydns, because both of those are going to allow, I think, a little more, or they're going to encourage a little more development of character in the piece. So they're going to be a striking difference from Bach, I think, in which we're going to play very to the point, right? And I think the challenge is, like, the Clementi that's on here is might end up being, even though it's different, it would be more of the same kind of stuff, more like straight into the point. The Kuhlau sonatinas would be more straight to the point. So would Mozart. But Haydn is kind of the master of humor in the classical era. So, oh, you've already done that. Well, there are 3 Haydn choices, Dith. If you've already done the Beethoven, if that's the one that you were, yes. I see the Clementi stuff, yeah. So, Dith, that's where I'll leave you. Listen to the Beethoven Bagatelle, Opus 119, and any of these 3 sonata movements from Haydn. I think even the Beethoven is going to have more opportunity to show more character in your interpretation. That will be substantially different than the character that we show in the Chopin that we're working on for List C. So, great. Okay. Cool. And Bedlington Groomer, thank you for all the timestamps that you always do. Oh my goodness. Oh, Nancy, you said you sat in the front row for a Paulini recital, and that was intense. That's very cool. And Amy from Motif Music, you said you like also lower stage lights because they're warm and yes, they can be very warm, like temperature-wise, and they can create a lot of glare. That is true. Okay. Oh my goodness, I think I caught up. Nathaniel has a second vote for Beethoven 119 number 1. Yes, no, it is not number 1. It's 119 number 4. But Beethoven bagatelles in general are great character pieces. That's great, Nancy. Okay. Oh, wonderful. Do we have more questions? There was a whole lot of discussion with the FBI agent earlier today, Agent Smith, about metronome, all kinds of technical stuff, transposition. Does anybody want to go back and chat about any of those topics? Let me know. Yeah, Sir Wolseley, the RCM syllabi are set up. There are some, there's a short list of recommendations that are very condensed, like 5 to 10 per category. And then there is a full long list that has, gosh, even list C for level 6 is like, it's three pages long of selections. Yeah. No, Dith, it will not make a difference if your list B from your previous level was also Beethoven. No. And what Beethoven was it? Was it a sonatina? Like a sonatina movement? Let's see, I'm seeing sonatina in F major or the minuet in G major. Beethoven, not Bach. The sonatina, great. No, that'll be a very different style than the bagatelles, and even no one's going to look at that anyway. But I also think that that's still a nice progression. If you choose a Beethoven bagatelle, it's going to be a different style of composition than sonatina. Okay, so gosh. I'll leave it up to you because I just saw your earlier comment. Would that make it lean more toward Haydn? Not necessarily. Pick the one of, and you don't even have to take my recommendations, but if you are going to stick to one of them, one of the 4 recommendations, pick the one that resonates with you the most. Right. Okay. Now, let's see. We had a couple of these questions get reiterated, or people are a little more curious about what was being chatted about earlier. So, Bennington Groomer said, so since you dislike metronomes when practicing, is it okay to have them on to find out how fast a piece should be, then turn it off to actually practice? Yes, that's one of my favorite ways of using a metronome. Also, metronomes are great for instilling a sense of pulse, or at least giving us a reference for what a sense of pulse is. But I also like to incorporate, if possible, maybe like, can we incorporate a bigger movement or another physical activity that we feel that sense of pulse with? You know, great, andante is a walking pace. Can we actually, instead of putting a metronome on to play andante, can we actually walk around and sing the piece while we walk? Can we get a sense of what andante is? Can we get a sense of like, what is the difference in how it feels to play or to feel a slow walking pace versus a fast walking pace, which might both be considered andante or andantino on the page, and we don't get that if we just put the metronome on and it clicks away at us. That's a way we can go deeper. And also, if it's an activity that we do daily, like walking, there is like a very relatable sense of how fast that pulse is, where we can more likely recreate that pulse without pulling the metronome back out to remind ourselves what it is. Yeah. Nathaniel, you say you like to use a metronome a lot while learning a piece slowly. It highlights the bars you need to work on more. That can be good. And I would also, if you can go further, where we learn our internal sense of metronome or our internal pulse is steady enough that we feel as soon as, if we change our pulse for the sake of the music, we know it, absolutely, the beat that it happens. We want to train our internal pulse that well so that it's not just an external stimuli, an external sense where we hear a click and, oh, it starts to feel too fast because our ears are telling us this device is, well, we're no longer with it, right? We want to train that to be internal as well. The one comment that Agent Smith had about clapping with the metronome, it is absolutely true that if you clap with the metronome, when the click goes away and you can't hear it anymore, you are precisely on beat. And that could be great practice to feel and internalize that pulse, because that's a combination of a physical movement with this device that we're using, with the metronome. And can we precisely, beat after beat after beat, articulate that beat with our body and mask? It's the physical property is masking, where one sound is louder than another one, or the frequencies are different, where we literally cannot hear something else happen, right? So that could be a great thing to do if we're training on rhythm and feeling a sense of pulse. But I wouldn't really do that while practicing a piece of music. It could be something you do, a couple minutes here and there on a practice day. Sit down, take 60 seconds or a minute, and work on one particular BPM. Clap with it. David says your internal clock wants to play everything at 98 beats per minute. David, I would wonder if that has any correlation with your actual heart rate, especially if you feel like you want to always go back to that tempo. Because if our body is feeling a pulse in a certain way, literally feeling pulse in a certain way, that might make us want to gravitate toward that. Yeah. Sir Wolseley, I know you don't like using the metronome too much. Yeah. I don't either. It's just that when we take rubato, we still want it to be within context. We still want it to have context, right? And that context is given by the framework of the pulse. Doesn't mean it has to follow the pulse exactly, but it needs to stay within the framework. Okay. Okay, Sir Woolsey said about transposition, wondering, is it actually worth it? And you saw Denis Zhdanov do a video about it also. Yeah. I think the benefits of, you guys are going to get a big preview of what is actually going to come out on the channel on Friday. Because for those of you that are here, that is the topic of Friday's video. Transposition of repertoire and its importance. I do not think that it has a great importance in our technical execution at the instrument. What was mentioned about Hanon and doing Hanon in multiple keys. If you play enough repertoire, you don't need to do that. That seems like a lot of time spent, and I think it could be used in better ways, especially if you don't have 4 to 8 hours a day to practice. Yes, Sir Woolsey, spoilers. The benefits of transposition, I think, are actually one and the same as what it takes to become a good sight reader. The benefits of transposition are learning all of what the actual relationships are on the page of music that we're reading, what's on the score. Because if we can learn how to transpose, in order to do that, or have a chance of doing it in time or on sight read or close to tempo, maybe not even in tempo, just without time to study, you have to be able to see all of the relationships that you need to be able to see to sight read well. Okay. So let me answer that, Sir Woolsey, because Dennis, you said he was referring to transposing certain passages of concerti that he needed to have in the repertoire when he was doing a lot of public performing. I would personally never do that. I'm glad it works for him. I would not do that because it would be likely that in a high-stress environment like a public performance, I might not choose the right key to play the passage in. If I have too many choices in front of me, especially if I have 24 choices in front of me, every major key and every minor key to play a passage in, and I am under the influence of cortisol, the stress chemical, right? Likely, I'm not maybe going to remember the key of the passage, what key it's supposed to be in. I am likely not going to choose the correct key to play the passage in if I've practiced all of them. That to me would create more stress. I would prefer to know absolutely every detail about the key that the passage is actually in. I want to know the harmonic relationship of every pitch. I want to know exactly what it is that I'm playing. I wouldn't learn that by necessarily transposing it and practicing it, transposition of it. Yeah. I'm probably going to do some videos about this, but I'm reading a book on more on the neuroscience of practicing. And I was just telling a student about this on Monday. But basically, if we think about our practicing as a snowy field in front of us, and the first time you play pitches, the first time you play notes, you're making a path through that snowy field to whatever destination you end up getting to. Hopefully, it's the correct playing of the passage, and we get to the end, and it's right? But the essence is that every time we play through something, we leave tracks in the snow, and our brain sees all of them. That's also why it's super important to try to not make mistakes in practice. Or when we do find mistakes, we really highly limit the number of times that we're allowed to make that mistake. Because every time we make the mistake, the tracks down the path toward the mistake get deeper. and they get more ingrained because the brain only remembers what we have done. It doesn't know the difference between getting it right and getting it wrong. It just knows that we executed it that way. Yeah, let's see. Bethington Groomer, the book, I have to look up the title. It's sitting in the other room. But it's by Molly Gebrian, or Gebrian. That's Gebrian. It's really directed at professionals performing that are looking for better resources or reasons, a way to make practicing more efficient or performing more reliable, right? Nathaniel, can you interleaved or interwoven practice? Can you describe that a little bit more so that I don't comment on the wrong thing? But to finish this conversation up about transposition of like passages that are needed for performance, if we put it in that context, now we've created however many transpositions we've practiced, we've created deep tracks through the snow that lead out in all of those directions, which requires, if we're going to choose the right one in performance and have it be reliable, we either have to have an incredibly strong will and mind, or we need to get rid of all the other tracks that we've made. That sums that up. I think my perspective on that. So basically what's going to come out on Friday here is how do we see patterns in the score right away? And great practice, we can get great practice if we try to take more simple music than what we're working on. So things that you might practice doing sight reading with, things that are 3 or 4 levels below your current level or greater. And can we take repertoire like that and start to figure out how to transpose it? Can we start to see all of the relationships on the score? Start by writing them down on the score, but then how fast can we see them on the printed page where the notes no longer are just notes and rhythms, but we see scales, we see arpeggios, we see harmonic relationships. And then the great test is, if you know multiple keys equally well, we can transpose simply because we know our scales, arpeggios, our harmonic relationships in the different keys, as well as we do in the key that the piece was originally written in. So there you go. The video is almost 30 minutes long, and I just summed it up in 3 minutes. But granted, the video that's going to come out does go through step by step exactly what we're thinking about, and I mark it up on the score, etc. Oh, Chris. Hello, Chris. Let me answer a couple of these other questions, and then I'm going to come back to yours. David said, all you need to do is practice 40 hours a day. Yeah, exactly. I hope I didn't miss a question, but Calais, they do have wearable metronomes. Actually, Chris, who just chimed in, can actually comment on at least on a brand, because I know that he owns one. A wearable metronome that is a haptic response, like on the wrist. So let's see. I see. Oh, I had asked Nathaniel about interleaved practice. You say going from one piece in a practice session, going to another, and then going back to the first. Fantastic. Yes, that's really great practice. In fact, there's a great argument that no matter what level you're playing at, you shouldn't spend more than about 20 minutes on one particular piece of music at a time. We want to balance how well we can focus on that task and on executing those pitches that we've probably worked on a lot already. We want to balance how well we focus on that versus and against how well we're going to focus on it if we allow some time to refresh. And refresh doesn't have to mean we don't even practice. It could mean we go to something different in practice and then return. So that's really, really great practice advice. Well, that's what Nathaniel said. So if you're practicing 4 different pieces of repertoire, don't play, 45 minutes on one and make that all of the work you do on that one piece during the day. Take 20 minutes, work on one, take another 20 minutes, work on something else, and then come back to finish your hour, if you can, and go back to the first piece that you worked on. Yeah. And Sir Wolseley, you said, could I talk about the podcast I was on a week ago? I'll mention just a real quick thing about that. Yeah. So I was a guest on the Holistic Music Academy, Holistic Musician Academy. I think that's the name of the podcast. By a friend of mine who's the host, TL. He is over in Germany, in the Berlin area. He's a fantastic jazz artist. Anyway, his podcast is really about, it's highly geared toward professional performers who are like the psychological impacts of having a performing career, how to deal with toxic relationships online with your teachers. Really deep questions like that. And then there's also talk about music business and things like that. So that was kind of the topic. The full podcast episode will probably come out in about a month officially. What happened last week was the taping session, which he invites people that would like to just be a part of the recording session. The informal recording session can just hop on and watch it live. And so anyway, we talked about a lot of related things, a little bit about piano pedagogy, and we chatted for almost 100 minutes, and I don't know how far that's going to get edited down to. Maybe like 45. But I will post a link for those of you that are interested in listening to the whole thing. I'll post a link when the episode actually comes out. Yeah. David. See, Pomodoro. Yes. Great. Nancy, I love it. And that's exactly actually something that I'm kind of referring to with 20-minute segments. By the way, a Pomodoro can officially be any length of time, I think between 20 minutes and 40 minutes. And that's up to you to figure out what length of time works best for you. But the Pomodoro technique, that's something I've actually wanted to do a video on, is how to apply the Pomodoro technique to piano practice. Because I already teach it. We already talk about it here. I haven't made it into like a cohesive package that everybody can use. But I'd like to do that. If you don't know about the Pomodoro technique, look up the Pomodoro technique. It was developed really for business owners. And it was developed as a business productivity tool. So how to make better use of your time, because we all have a limited amount of time. Yeah, diff. There you go. That's great. Oh, good. So anyway, there's a whole lot. One of the interesting things these days is that there's a lot of science and research that's gone into business and athletics that we as musicians can highly benefit from. Because athletics has a lot to do with, athletic research is about how we use the body and how we do things more efficiently, and how the mind tracks and the brain tracks where we, how we imprint movement, right? And then in business is a lot about productivity and how to use our time better. Well, we need both of those things at the piano when we sit down to practice. Or we could at least benefit from knowing some of both of those things, or a lot of both of those things. Let's see. Motif Music also says, oh, this is great. So you reiterated Nathaniel's thing about interleaved practice, where you're visiting more repertoire and concepts and layering them throughout your time. Yes. Yes. And then you also said you found it helpful to think of the way your mind works at different times of the day. So you're much better at Bach and technique in the morning and memorization and like the phrase and romantic era drama later on in the day. That's really interesting. And I think that's a great thing that we can all learn from. Do we make more progress doing certain things at certain times of the day? Do we have more focus to work on certain things like technique in any piece, or technique for technique's sake? Do we have a better sense of focus on that earlier in the day than we do later? I don't think there's one correct answer to that, by the way. And I think we can all have a little different experience on a daily basis. But if we pay attention to that, we can make our practicing even more efficient, which is a word that I love. So let me go back to Christopher's question. Christopher said, had a question about my bite-size practicing video and my admonition to avoid looping. Oh, this isn't really a question, but it's something I can talk about for a second. So you say, all of us loop, but take at least a breath between iterations. Yes. Yes. Why do we want to take a breath between iterations? And why don't we? So those of you that have watched the video, Christopher, you could answer this too. Why don't we want to loop at the piano? What is so dangerous about looping? And what is looping? Oh, thanks, Bedlington Grimmer. Anybody? Z-Spark, that would be cool. Bringing your piano with you on lunch break, yeah. So Raj said, looping reinforces mechanical connection as opposed to holistic connection. David says, mindlessly repeating. Benlington Groomer says, you don't let your mind soak in when you loop. Yes. All of those are the truth. Mindlessness in practice is something that we should always be trying to avoid. So let's see. I'm going back to what Raj said. It reinforces mechanical connection. Let me talk a little bit more about that, because I have even seen online some teachers prescribe looping as a good thing. Kind of because of what Raj just said, which is that we might feel like the hands get to know it faster and faster and faster. Raj said it reinforces mechanical connection. I'm taking mechanical as a positive thing in this case, and not the unmusical connection, but the mechanics of playing. If we take anything, just something that came to mind, that is more difficult, that, maybe someone would be inclined to loop. From the Appassionata. So, looping would be taking this. Oh, not even that. Gosh, I put a pause in there. It would be like taking that bar and playing it over and over and over and over and over again with no break. What some people have found, some people that I've talked to have found that they feel like when they loop something, they can play it better and they can play it better. And like the physical connection to what they're playing, it gets built faster. The problem is that they take a break, they come back to that passage 5 minutes later, and it's actually no better than where it was during the first repetition of the loop that they just did. Because while it's true that during the process of continuing to execute the same movement over and over and over and over again, the mind kind of packaged all of that movement up into one nice little package and said, okay, this is important right now, but it's going in short-term memory. As soon as you moved on to something else, it got ejected from the brain, okay? Or at least a lot of it got ejected from our memory, and a lot of the physical motion left. So, see, Raj said, I think there are certain exceptions where if you loop a small bite-sized passage, it can help the body learn the feeling for that instance of the phrase. There might be some truth in that. There might be some truth in that. But I still would never play more than like 3 repetitions of something without a pause. That would be the absolute maximum. And then those other pauses, if we're truly, Raj, this goes back to like, and you're talking 4 to 6 notes. I don't practice that way at all, Raj. Here's something that also goes back to the conversation that we had earlier. How difficult is it to stay fully connected and present for each of those repetitions for 4 to 6 notes? If you're repeating them and repeating them and repeating them, are you, and if you can answer this question, yes, you are, then perhaps it is okay. Are you truly present and in the moment for every single movement that sounds every pitch, for every repetition? If you are, then there isn't a need for us to pause and break and reset. There isn't as much of a need, because by staying present, we are telling the brain all of what we're playing is very important. The problem is that most people, it takes a lot of practicing in order to get to the point where that might be a possibility. Yeah. So Raj, so you said being present and checking in, but the question is how present? It's not a check-in at the end of every 6 notes. It's a check-in with every single note in the passage. Every single note of every single repetition. Are you fully behind each one of them? And the moment that you aren't fully behind or in front of, however you want to think about it, each of those notes, as we practice, we need to introduce a pause. And the pause helps us to reset, and it helps the mind to package up what it just worked on. There's still something beyond that's neurological, that as soon as we pause, even if we are present for every movement, the brain is going to do a better job putting it all together during the time that we're not actually executing it, right? But the biggest thing to avoid is not being fully present with every single note. So, to even disagree with myself, you don't need to do as much bite-sized practice if you can play every note of every passage and you are right with it, laser focused the whole time. If you can sustain that for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, that's great. I do think it is possible to get to the point where you can, but it takes a lot of practicing to get to that point. And so the real the underlying reason for that video is that a great majority of people studying the piano have not and probably will not get to that point in practice where they can sit down and work through something like that. And so the breaks are super, super important. Yeah, Raj, what you're saying is correct there. Yeah. Yeah, Bedlington Groomer, you said taking the pause keeps you honest about what you're practicing and how much you're learning because you're rarely laser focused. Yeah, Christopher, you're very perceptive. I am sitting slightly lower than I usually do for the sake of the camera. See, Bedlington Groomer, because you're rarely laser focused for such long lengths of time. In my experience, working with students of piano, working with other pianists, there are very few people that I have met across life so far that even have the ability to focus down so precisely as what we're really talking about. It's like getting into the flow state, if you've read the science about that and you know about that, right? It's getting so focused on what we're doing that we do not even experience the passing of time because nothing else exists in our mind except the notes we're playing and as we play them, right? That's a really difficult place to get to. It's possible. But my favorite saying for today, it takes a lot of practicing to get there. So, yeah. Chris, let's see. I hope that you just brought it up. You didn't have a particular question, but I hope that shed some extra light on the topic of that video. Yeah. Yeah, Raj. Absolutely. Oh, that's good. Yeah. I don't even have anything else to add to that. Oh, gosh. If there's one more question or if there's something I missed, please drop it in the chat. I'll take one more, and then we're going to call it a day for today. Am I working on something classical? Sir Wolseley asks. I am working on rememorizing the Rachmaninoff Elegy, and that's the big thing that I'm working on. I'm probably going to film it next month. And otherwise, I have a recording session this Friday of a bunch of originals and arrangements that I'm going to try to knock out in the morning, Friday morning. So those are all being practiced currently, but only one officially classical thing. So Nathaniel, thanks for bringing this back up. Tips on for Elise, the repeated A in the middle. Nathaniel, have you seen my video on using repeated fingers? I think the title of the video is Stop Using the Same Finger, or Stop Using Repeated Fingers, Alternating Fingers. And I talk about this passage in particular, and it's not to say that we actually don't want to use them, but it's to say that there's a good time to use 3-2-1, and there's a bad time to use 3-2-1. Oh, Rhodesy. Brutal. Rhodesy, playing for Elise is like a rite of passage. I think everybody has to play it. You have to play it. Okay. So the middle section. Maybe that's even a little too fast. Okay. Nathaniel, let's see. So you tips. So tips on playing this. One, I'll condense this into a couple tips. So first tip, it's important to learn the 3-2-1 alternating finger choice for repeated notes. Not only is it important to learn it, it's important to learn how to also play 1-2-1-2-1-2-1-2-1-2-1 2-1-2-1 and 4-3-2-1 4-3-2-1 4-3-2-1. I would say thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so all of those alternating fingers are important skills to have, to be able to articulate the different fingers and articulate them equally or create a shape with them. Either of those are actually very difficult. Playing all of them equally is very hard. Creating a good shape on the same pitch is very hard, right? But in addition to that, we should be able to play... Oh, Raj, love what you're saying. I love the Mendelssohn songs without words. Yeah, many of them. So, Nathaniel, also, we need to be able to play this with a single finger, like 2, over and over again. And part of, when you go back and watch that video, I can sum it up for you, but part of what that video is saying is that usually at an intermediate level, we play with alternating fingers because it reduces the tension in the hand and in the wrist. That's why many times you'll see almost everybody who plays for Elise who is just learning it will use 3-2-1, 3-2-1, 3-2-1. The issue is that as soon as you get a chord, 5 bars later, guess what? You cannot use alternating fingers on the chords. So we have 1, 2, 3 bars in this C section, 3 bars that we don't have that choice, that we have to learn how to articulate those with single finger movements and wrist movements. Right? That means, truly, we should be able to play all of the rest of the notes in this passage with a single finger if we wanted to. So, just using 2. Still, single fingers. Yeah. So, Nathaniel, I don't know if you were particularly asking about the alternating fingering, but that's the very first thing that sticks out at me about this passage in this piece, is that truly you do not have to play them 3-2-1, 3-2-1. And you probably should be playing it with the pedal. You said 3-2-1 without pedal. We should be playing it with the pedal because there is no other way to fully connect all of the rest of this, and here especially, without pedal, there's nothing we can do to not have this be broken. It's going to be broken, even if you use some really, really advanced fingerings. Parts of the chords are still going to be broken. And most scores will not even suggest those fingers. They say 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, or 4, but it's 5-5-5 over and over and over again. All of that leans toward it has to be pedaled for connection. Yes? Yeah, so Nathaniel, you said you're trying to get a non-staccato sound. Practicing this left hand without pedal, if you really have a relaxed technique, could be great for finding just the point that we can release the key and re-articulate that. But that's a lot harder than it has to be. That makes this passage really difficult. And if you're listening closely, as I'm trying to find this, you can hear that I'm bouncing a little on 3. And sometimes one of the fingers isn't releasing because I've made the motion surrounding this so tight to try to show connection on a single pitch, that I'm introducing other, we'll call them artifacts, not good things like glitches. But if I put the pedal down, one finger, these are all the same. And then I can really phrase the right hand. Yeah, Bachward's Fellow, you mentioned Long Long's performance. I actually quite like it for this piece. It's on the slow side, and it's very emotional. I guess you could say that about all of Long Long's performances. But I think it shows how far you could take for Elise in interpretation. And I think it's lovely, actually. So Nathaniel, I hope some of that helps. If I were your teacher, I would be insistent on using pedal through here, maintaining a relaxed technique, and I would be asking you to play the repeated notes with both alternating fingerings and single fingers, and be able to articulate them both ways equally well. I think this is a great opportunity to learn the benefits of both of those. There are going to be pieces in the future that you play where we have to use alternating fingers. And Nathaniel, to me, it's not just easier. It's that it's not possible to get the correct tone without pedal. It's just not possible. There is no amount of work we could put in practicing these bars to eliminate enough of the gap between the notes. It's literally not physically possible, because there has to be a release. And as we release, the dampers are going to come in contact with the strings. Even on a partial key release, which you can see right now, I'm not releasing all the way. I'm halfway. And the dampers are still coming in contact with the strings, and they're causing all of this to turn detached. Almost none of the piece have slur marks. That doesn't mean that it's supposed to be detached. And you won't hear many people play it that way. But I think it would truly be a great place to learn, one, how necessary pedal is, and two, how to use pedaling in a way that only adds to and doesn't detract from the piece. How to use pedal and not let, because as soon as we don't use pedal, the left hand doesn't have any chance of running away from us dynamically, right? Because these are all individual articulations. Put the pedal down, it's actually harder, because every time we restrike a string that is already ringing, there is a chance that we're going to strike it with force that is going to add to the resonance. And if we add to the resonance, now we don't have one consistent articulated pitch. You have something like that happen, and you could hear how it doesn't take much for that single note to get a different color and to get a little brighter and twangy. And then with the pedal down, we actually can't fix that in the middle of the bar, because if we let the pedal go, we're going to lose all of the resonance that we have just built. So truly, I would argue playing this passage with pedal is actually more difficult, because you don't have any opportunities to hide, which is like so counterintuitive, because we think about the pedal as being, one of my teachers said, the pedal covers a multitude of sins. And I think pedal has that, I can't think of the word, but it has that negativity surrounding it, right? That pedal, like what Antonio said, pedal's like mayonnaise. It makes almost anything taste better. I love mayonnaise too. But truly, if we are not allowed to lift the pedal except when dictated by, in this case, the melody, next bar, how we articulate the left hand becomes much more challenging because we can't misarticulate a single one of those 16th notes. Otherwise, we draw attention to it. And then we've pulled attention away from the melody, and we've created a bounce or a bum right in the middle of a passage, and we have no way of correcting it if we don't allow the pedal to change when it happens. So Nathaniel says, how are you doing it? Playing super softly? Yes, I am playing one finger. Sometimes I use two fingers. I don't think I've actually used this camera angle at all today. 2 hours and 20 minutes in. I use, sometimes in this piece, 1 and 3 together. And I just pulse. Not allowing the key to fully release. But if I take the pedal off, that's what's happening. And you can hear there are all kinds of little gaps in there. But I'm not worried about eliminating those gaps. I am most worried about making sure that every articulation of this note is exactly the same as all previous ones. So we want to hear that. That's my safest way of doing it, is with 1 and 3. But if we were working on this, be able to do that with 3-2-1, be able to do that with 2-1-2, be able to do it with 4-3-2-1, be able to do it with second finger alone, be able to do it with third finger alone. Gosh, be able to do it with fifth finger alone, which isn't, we would never use that in performance. But guess what? A couple bars later, 5 bars later, you have to, when we play these chords, right? Let's see. Yeah, Dith said pedals like C major gets a bad rep for no good reason. Makes you seem like a big shot if you don't need it. I'll say this. I said this on the last stream. One of my mentors said, all of the greatest artists, not when they're playing Bach necessarily, but all of the greatest concert artists are always employing the pedal. It's not something to be avoided. It's something that it takes actually a lot of care to learn how to use it the right way and to learn what affects it and how it changes how we actually have to use the hands in order for everything to work together. There are reasons to play with that pedal. Of course there are. And there are plenty of times where pedal is a bad thing and we can have too much pedaling, or we could be pedaling in the wrong place, or we could be misusing the playing mechanism in the foot and the fingers and how they work together to not show pedaling well. Yeah, that can all happen. But rarely, except in Baroque music, rarely is it a good thing to omit the pedal completely. Yeah, we'll leave it with that. Rotsi, even there, using pedal in a staccato section is pure evil. Depends on who the composer is. Because there will be times, like in Debussy and Ravel, where staccato articulations will be marked, because staccato sometimes can show the articulation of the hand and the wrist, but not the articulation of actually the underlying resonance. What do you do if you have a whole note with a staccato over it? Or, I mean, in even a more literal sense, what do you do if we have staccato passage that has a pedal marking from the composer? Yeah, so that's what I just said, Rhodesy. There you go. It's not weird. It's not weird because staccato changes the articulation. It changes the color of the tone. And the pedal marking says it's not supposed to be a short articulation. It's not supposed to be a blip. It's supposed to ring, and it's supposed to do that. Those are the directions from the composer. But it's just supposed to have a change in tone color. So we have the tone color from the staccato articulation, but held by pedal. It's not hidden. Okay. That was a great place to call it a day. Okay. Yes, Nathaniel. Good luck. Please, Nathaniel, if you wanna send it in, don't let Rhodesy get to you. We would love to hear your fur, Elise. So please send a video in if you'd like to chat about it on one of these streams. Oh, Bedling's a Groomer, thanks so much. Yes, if you could hit the thumbs up button, that would be great. You know, one more bit of news before we wrap up. Oh my gosh, so we have a couple weeks until we'd have our next stream. That would normally be on the 13th of November, but I'm not going to be in town. I'm going to be having a grand old time at the Mason & Hamlin Piano Factory in Boston. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of my adventures there with all of you. But that means there won't be a stream on the 13th of November. I am debating still about how streaming is going to work in the month, because then our second stream would be the day before Thanksgiving here in the U.S., which maybe half of my viewers here on the stream are from the U.S. and half of you are from other parts of the world. So I'm still debating on what's going to happen there. All that to say, I'm going to put out a post in the YouTube community, and I'll probably also send out an email if you're on the email list about when the next stream is going to be, because it might end up being the 6th, which would not be the normal day. So it might be the 6th of November, or we might skip, and I might do one stream in November on the 20th. So anyway, I just haven't decided yet. So keep an eye out for that. Check in, and I will, for sure, I always make like the landing page of these streams the day before. I will make that one well in advance so that if you do check on the channel, you'll be able to see what day and time the next stream is actually happening. Calais, the email list is, oh gosh, many of my videos here have a link in the, I don't know if it's under this one. It'll be for sure under Friday's video, the video that comes out Friday. There's a link in most of them to sign up for the email list. You get a practice planner when you sign up, and you get a free piece of sheet music, one of my own originals, when you sign up for the email list. That's just my way of saying thank you for that. Yeah, and then we can keep in touch that way. And once in a while, I send out, it's like once a month, I try to send out an email. The last one came out about 2 weeks ago, and it was all about pedaling in practice. So, in any case, Nathaniel, no, don't let the standards, don't let yourself feel that way. Just send in wherever you are in progress. It's a lesson, and you know, if we all came super prepared to our lessons, guess what? We wouldn't have to take lessons. So truly, Nathaniel, just think about it as a way that everybody here is super supportive. I'm here to just be helpful, and we'd love to hear you play. So, okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for being here. Keep in touch. I will keep in touch about when the next stream is. Check out the video on Friday, and if you haven't yet, pre-save my new EP down below in the description. All right. See you, everybody. See you all next time. Practice smarter, not harder. Bye.